Hello everyone, today Baker with a Heart bring you a story full of humanity and compassion. We hope you enjoy listening.
The dim glow of neon lights flickered across the rain-slicked pavement outside the roadside diner, casting long shadows that danced like forgotten memories. Olivia sat alone at the counter, her fingers tracing the rim of a half-empty coffee mug. The steam long since faded into the cool night air. It was just past midnight in the dusty outskirts of a nowhere town, the kind where truckers nursed their regrets and locals whispered about lives left behind. She was 38, with laugh lines etched deeper than she remembered, and tonight the weight of solitude pressed heavier than usual. Her friends had dragged her out for what they called a girls' night, but they'd scattered hours ago, leaving her with the bill and a hollow ache. When the waitress swung by with a sympathetic smile, Olivia forced a chuckle, her voice carrying a brittle edge. "You know, I joked earlier that I'd forgotten what attraction even felt like. Like, does it still exist out there? Or did it get lost in the laundry with my dignity?" The words hung in the air, half laugh, half sigh, but inside they cut deep. A confession wrapped in humor. Born from years of nursing her ailing mother alone, watching dreams dissolve into routine. The diner door creaked open then, letting in a gust of wind that carried the low rumble of thunder from distant hills. Olivia glanced up, expecting another weary traveler, but what rolled in was something out of a fever dream, a lone figure on a weathered Harley, leather jacket scarred from road and time, helmet tucked under one arm. He was broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper stubble framing a face weathered by sun and secrets, eyes like polished steel under the brim of a faded cap. Ethan, though she wouldn't learn his name for another hour, didn't belong here, not in this fluorescent-lit limbo. He moved with the quiet purpose of a man who'd seen too many dawns break over empty horizons, his boots thudding softly against the checkered floor as he claimed a stool 2 seats down. The air shifted with him, carrying the faint scent of engine oil and rain-damp leather, a reminder of freedoms she'd long ago traded for stability. She didn't mean to stare, but the way he ordered, black coffee, no sugar, voice gravelly and unhurried, drew her in like a moth to a flame. Outside, his bike gleamed under the diner's awning, chrome accents catching the light like whispered promises. Olivia's mind wandered unbidden to the life she'd imagined once, wind in her hair, roads unspooling endlessly, a partner who saw her fire beneath the ashes. But reality crashed back when the door banged open again, louder this time. 3 locals, rough types from the nearby mill, reeking of cheap beer and entitlement, stumbled in, their laughter turning sharp as they spotted her. "Hey, sweetheart," one slurred, leaning too close, his breath sour. "You look like you could use some company. Forgot what fun feels like." The others guffawed, crowding her space, their shadows swallowing the counter's warmth. Olivia's heart pounded, her joke from earlier twisting into something uglier in their leers. She gripped her mug tighter, voice steady, but eyes flashing defiance. "I'm fine. Back off." Ethan's head turned slowly, his gaze locking on the scene without a flicker of surprise. He'd ridden through enough backwater stops to recognize the script: vulnerability met with predation, the weak preying on the overlooked. In his pocket, a faded letter pressed against his thigh, a promise from 20 years back, sworn to a brother-in-arms lost to the sands of some forgotten conflict. "Watch out for the ones who stand alone," it read, words inked in haste before the world claimed him. Ethan had buried that oath under layers of miles and solitude, but tonight it stirred like an engine igniting. He slid off his stool, the leather of his jacket creaking softly, and stepped between them, his presence a wall of quiet authority. "Gentlemen," he said, voice low but carrying the weight of thunder, "the lady said she's fine. Let's keep it that way." The leader puffed up, chest out, But something in Ethan's eyes, the unyielding calm of a man who'd faced worse than barroom bluster, made him hesitate. "Mind your own." "Biker!" he spat, but the fire in his words faltered. Ethan's hand rested lightly on the counter, not threatening, just there, a reminder of the strength coiled beneath. The air thickened, the diner's hum fading to a tense hush, rain pattering against the windows like impatient fingers. One of the men muttered something crude, shoving forward, but Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he met the gaze head-on, his words measured. "Walk away, now, or we all learn how fragile egos can be." It wasn't a shout, wasn't a plea, just truth, delivered with the certainty of someone who'd stared down chaos and chosen honor over havoc. They backed off, grumbling, slinking to a corner booth like scolded dogs. The diner exhaled, the waitress murmuring thanks under her breath. Olivia's pulse still raced, but now it thrummed with something electric, alive. She turned to him, searching his face. "You didn't have to do that, but thank you." Ethan nodded, sliding back to his stool, but closer now, the space between them shrinking. "Seen enough roads to know when someone's worth the stop," he replied, his eyes holding hers a beat longer than necessary. In that moment, the joke she'd made earlier shattered, replaced by a spark she hadn't felt in years. A pull, magnetic and real, like the first rev of an engine after a long winter. As the rain eased to a drizzle, they talked. Not deep confessions, not yet. Just fragments. Her mother's lingering illness, the small town that felt like a cage. His endless rides, chasing ghosts of promises unkept. Ethan spoke little of himself, but his stories wove in hints of a brotherhood forged in fire, a club called Iron Vow that bound men like family, loyal to the bone. "We ride for what's right," he said, tracing a scar on his knuckles, "even when it costs." Olivia listened, the coffee forgotten, feeling seen for the first time in ages. By the time the clock ticked toward 2, the attraction she'd joked about bloomed undeniable, a quiet fire, fanned by his steady presence. But dawn was coming, and with it, a call Ethan couldn't ignore. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a number from an old contact, voice urgent on the line. A woman in peril, echoes of that ancient promise resurfacing. Olivia watched him, sensing the shift, the way his jaw tightened. "Trouble?" she asked softly. He met her eyes, the weight of decision hanging. "Always is. But maybe. This time it's ours to fix." In that vow, unspoken yet binding, everything changed. Her isolation cracking, his solitary path veering toward redemption. Two souls on the cusp of a ride that would test loyalty, unearth buried truths and forge a family from the embers of chance. The first light crept over the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and shadow as Ethan fired up his Harley. Olivia stood, heart pounding, the scent of gasoline mingling with possibility. "You coming?" he asked, helmet extended like an invitation to rewrite her story. She hesitated, then nodded, the joke of forgotten attraction now a memory, replaced by the thrill of what lay ahead. The engine's roar swallowed the last whispers of the night as Ethan gunned the throttle, the Harley surging forward like a beast awakened from slumber. Olivia clung to him from behind, her arms wrapped tight around his waist, the leather of his jacket cool against her palms, despite the warmth building between them. The road unfurled ahead, a black ribbon cutting through the waking desert, flanked by saguaro cacti standing sentinel in the pale dawn light. Wind whipped at her hair, carrying the sharp tang of creosote and dust, a scent that stirred something primal in her chest, a freedom she'd only dreamed of in stolen moments between hospital shifts and empty evenings. Her heart hammered not just from the speed, but from the man at the helm, Ethan's back solid as oak, his posture unyielding yet protective, guiding them into the unknown. They'd barely spoken since leaving the diner, words unnecessary in the symphony of the ride. The phone call that had pulled him away replayed in her mind, his face hardening as he listened, voice clipped with questions she couldn't hear. "A friend from the old days," he'd said finally, pocketing the device. "Her daughter's gone missing. Last seen near the border towns, tangled in something ugly." The details were sparse, but the urgency in his tone had mirrored the fire in his eyes when he'd faced down those drunks. Olivia hadn't pressed. Instead, she'd climbed on, driven by that electric pull, the joke about forgotten attraction now feeling like a lifetime ago. As miles blurred by, she leaned closer, her cheek against his shoulder, feeling the subtle rhythm of his breathing sync with the pulse of the engine. The sun climbed higher, turning the sky a fierce blue. When they pulled into a sun-baked gas station on the edge of a forgotten highway, Ethan cut the ignition, the sudden silence amplifying the distant cry of a hawk wheeling overhead. He dismounted first, offering a hand that she took without hesitation, her fingers lingering in his calloused grip. "You holding up?" he asked, his voice roughened by the wind, eyes scanning her face with a gentleness that belied his rugged frame. Olivia nodded, brushing dust from her jeans, the reality of her impulsive choice settling like grit on her skin. "Better than I have in years, but who is she? This friend?" Ethan poured gas into the tank, the metallic glug echoing in the stillness, before meeting her gaze. "Lena. Served with her husband back in the war. Before the vow. He didn't make it home, but we promised to look out for his family. Iron vow isn't just a patch, it's blood oath. She called because the cops down there are dragging their feet. Says the girls run off with some lowlifes running scams across the state line." Olivia's stomach twisted, images flashing unbidden, a young face lost in shadows, echoes of her own mother's decline, the helplessness of watching loved ones slip away. She'd nursed enough patients in the local clinic to know the underbelly of small-town despair, addictions festering like open wounds, authorities turning blind eyes for the right price. "And you, just like that, you ride?" She searched his face, tracing the lines etched by sun and sorrow. Ethan capped the tank, his expression darkening, promised him on a night like this one, stars burning holes in the sky. "If I don't come back, keep them safe. Buried that under too many roads, but it don't fade." He paused, then added softer, "Didn't figure I'd have company. But you remind me why we fight for the overlooked." They mounted up again, the Harley humming to life, but the easy rhythm of the ride shifted as the landscape grew harsher, rocky outcrops giving way to sun-bleached plains dotted with rusted relics of abandoned mines. Olivia's mind raced, piecing together fragments. Ethan's club, the Iron Vow, a brotherhood of riders who traded battlefields for backroads, upholding justice where badges failed. She'd glimpsed the tattoo on his forearm earlier, a coiled serpent around a broken chain, symbol of bonds unbreakable. Attraction simmered beneath it all, not just the physical draw of his steady hands or the way his laugh rumbled low when she teased about her rusty riding skills, but a deeper current, shared scars, unspoken understandings. Yet doubt crept in with the rising heat. What place did a diner waitress have in this world of oaths and dangers? By midday, they veered off the main drag toward a cluster of weathered buildings masquerading as a town, faded signs creaking in the breeze, a single traffic light swaying like a noose. Ethan slowed as they approached a nondescript motel, its parking lot cracked and empty, save for a dusty pickup. "Lena's holed up here," he said, killing the engine. The air hung heavy with the smell of sun-baked asphalt and distant rain. They stepped inside the lobby, a dim space lit by a buzzing fluorescent, where a woman in her 40s waited, her face gaunt with worry, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Lena rose from a sagging chair, embracing Ethan like a lifeline. "You came. God, Ethan, it's bad. Sarah, my girl, she's 16, thought she was in love with some charmer from the mill. Now whispers say he's mixed up with traffickers, moving folks across the line for cash." Olivia hung back at first, feeling like an intruder, but Lena's gaze found her, softening with gratitude. "And you? Riding with this lone wolf?" Ethan introduced her simply, but the warmth in his tone spoke volumes. As they settled into a corner booth at the attached cafe, steam rising from mismatched mugs of coffee, details unfolded like an unraveling thread. Sarah had vanished 2 nights prior, leaving a note about starting over. But leads pointed to a corrupt ring exploiting runaways, shielded by local enforcers who'd long ago sold their souls. Ethan's jaw clenched, the promise from his fallen brother igniting like dry tinder. "We don't wait for permission. Vow's got eyes everywhere. I'll call in the crew." The conversation wove through plans and memories, Lena sharing stories of her husband's quiet heroism, the way he'd taught Ethan to mend engines under desert stars. Olivia listened, her hand brushing Ethan's under the table. A silent anchor. Attraction deepened into alliance, her own past bubbling up, years caring for her mother, sacrificing dreams for duty, now finding purpose in this fray. But as shadows lengthened outside, a truck rumbled into the lot, headlights piercing the dusk like accusatory fingers. Ethan tensed, hand drifting to his side. "That's them. Stay close." The door swung open, admitting 2 figures in worn jackets, their eyes scanning the room with predatory intent. Tension coiled, the air thick with unspoken threats, as Ethan rose slowly, his presence a shield once more. Olivia's pulse quickened, not with fear, but resolve. The biker who'd changed everything in seconds now pulling her into a fight for redemption, where loyalty would forge their path or break it. The door to the cafe swung shut behind the 2 men, the hinges groaning like a warning in the dimming light. Dust motes swirled in the fading sunbeams, slanting through the grimy windows, and the air thickened with the scent of stale coffee and unspoken menace. Ethan stood motionless, his broad frame blocking the path to their booth, the coiled serpent tattoo on his forearm flexing subtly as his fingers curled at his sides. Olivia's breath caught, her hand still warm from where it had brushed his moments before, now gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. Lena's face paled, her eyes darting between the newcomers and Ethan, a silent plea hanging in the space between them. The taller of the 2 men, broad as a barrel with a jaw shadowed by unkempt stubble, scanned the room with eyes like chipped flint. His companion hovered a step behind, slighter but no less watchful, hands shoved deep into the pockets of a threadbare jacket that smelled faintly of motor oil and regret. They weren't locals in the casual sense. Their postures screamed hired muscle, the kind that enforced silence in towns where the law turned a blind eye. "Looking for Lena," the leader said, voice flat as hammered tin, ignoring Ethan entirely at first. But his gaze flicked up, assessing the biker's unyielding stance, the quiet authority that filled the room like exhaust from a revving engine. Lena shrank back slightly, but her voice held steady, laced with the steel of a woman who'd buried a husband and raised a daughter through storms. "What do you want? If it's about Sarah, you tell those scummongers she's coming home, and they can rot." The words trembled at the edges, but they landed like sparks on dry grass. Olivia felt a surge of admiration, her own resolve hardening. This wasn't just Ethan's fight anymore. The attraction that had sparked in the diner had evolved into something fiercer, a shared fire pulling her deeper into the fray. Ethan stepped forward, his boots scraping softly against the worn linoleum, positioning himself fully between the women and the intruders. "You heard her. Say your piece and go." His tone was even, no bluster, just the measured calm of a man who'd stared down far worse under foreign skies. The leader smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes, which narrowed as he sized up the biker. "Heard you're stirring trouble, friend. Girls with folks who know how to handle runaways. Best you ride on before things get messy." The implication hung heavy, laced with the rot of corruption. Whispers Olivia had heard back home about border rings preying on the desperate, shielded by badges bought with blood money. The slighter man shifted, pulling a hand from his pocket to reveal a crumpled photo, edges frayed like old promises. He slid it across a nearby table. The image showing a grainy shot of Sarah. Olivia recognized the girl's face from Lena's earlier description, wide-eyed and defiant, arm-linked with a slick-haired youth who screamed trouble. "She's fine, just needs space, you interfere, and it gets ugly for everyone." Ethan's eyes dropped to the photo, his jaw tightening imperceptibly, the weight of his brother's oath pressing like a phantom chain around his neck. He'd ridden these roads for years, burying the iron vows creed under solitude, but seeing that young face, echoes of the innocence he'd failed to protect once, stirred the embers. "Space from what? The kind that ends in chains," he replied, voice low, probing without accusation, seeking the truth beneath the threat. The leader's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. He glanced at his partner, then back to Ethan, the cafe's hum, clinking dishes from the kitchen, the distant tick of a wall clock, fading into tense silence. Rain began to patter against the roof again, a soft drumbeat underscoring the standoff. Olivia rose slowly, her heart thundering, but she moved to Ethan's side, not as a bystander but an ally, her presence a quiet declaration. "She's just a kid," she said, her voice cutting through the haze, steady despite the knot in her stomach. "If you're so sure she's safe, why the threats? Why not let her mother see for herself?" The men exchanged a look, the taller one stepping closer, invading the space with a puff of breath that carried the sour tang of tobacco. "Mind your lane, lady. This ain't your rodeo." But Ethan's hand rose subtly, a barrier without touch, his eyes locking onto the intruders with the unblinking focus of a hawk. "It is now. Iron vow doesn't forget its own, and neither do I." The words carried the weight of history, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of loss, where promises outlasted bullets and borders. The slighter man fidgeted, whispering urgently to his companion, but the leader held ground, chest puffing in false bravado. "You call in your pack of thugs, and we'll have the law down here faster than you can twist that throttle. Sheriff's on our side, always has been." That was the crack, the moral rot Olivia had sensed from the start. Corruption wasn't new to her. She'd seen it in the clinic. Patients turned away for lack of proper papers, favors traded in shadowed corners. But hearing it laid bare ignited something in Ethan, a slow burn of justice, poetic and unyielding. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence alone eroded their confidence like wind wearing down canyon walls. "Law's only as good as the man wearing the star," he said softly, almost to himself. "And if he's bent, we straighten it. Tell your bosses, the girl's coming home, no games." Tension peaked, the air electric as the leader's hand twitched toward his belt, a vague outline suggesting more than keys. Lena gasped, clutching Olivia's arm, but the waitress behind the counter, a wiry woman with eyes sharp as switchblades, slammed a tray down, drawing all eyes. "Out!" she barked, voice brooking no argument. "This ain't the place for your dirt." The distraction broke the spell. The men backed toward the door, muttering curses, but their retreat was hasty. The photo left behind like a gauntlet thrown. The door banged shut, rain sheeting down outside, washing the lot in silvery streaks. Ethan exhaled slowly, the rigidity easing from his shoulders as he turned to the women. "They're scared? Means we're close?" Lena nodded, tears brimming, but gratitude shining through. "Thank you, both of you, Sarah. She needs this." Olivia met Ethan's gaze, the spark between them now a steady flame, deepened by the stand they'd taken together. His hand found hers briefly, calluses rough against her skin, a silent vow of their own. "Called the crew while we talked," he murmured. "Riders inbound by nightfall. Iron vow rides as one." As dusk deepened, the motel lot filled with the low growl of approaching engines, headlights piercing the gloom like beacons of loyalty. Olivia stood beside Ethan on the porch, wind tugging at her jacket, the scent of wet earth rising. The first bikes pulled in, a dozen strong, their riders dismounting with nods of respect, patches gleaming under the flickering neon. Brothers in leather and scars, drawn by the ancient call of promise kept. Lena watched from the window, hope flickering anew. But as the group huddled, mapping the shadowed trails to Sarah's trail, Olivia felt the pull of deeper secrets, Ethan's past wounds, the cost of redemption, and the family she was choosing 1 mile at a time. The night air hummed with purpose, thunder rumbling in the distance as plans solidified into action. Yet beneath the resolve, doubt lingered like exhaust. How far would corruption push back, and what price would loyalty exact? Ethan glanced at Olivia, his eyes reflecting the gathering storm, a question unspoken but clear, ready for the ride ahead. She squeezed his hand. The attraction that began with a joke, now the anchor in the gathering tempest. The rumble of engines swelled like a gathering storm, vibrating through the motel's cracked parking lot as the Iron Vow riders pulled in one by one, their headlights slicing through the thickening dusk like knives through silk. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed over his leather-clad chest, the faint glow of a cigarette tip illuminating the hard lines of his face. Olivia lingered beside him, the chill night air nipping at her exposed skin, carrying the mingled scents of rain-soaked gravel and the sharp bite of exhaust. She watched the procession with a mix of awe and trepidation, 10, 12, now 15 bikes forming a ragged semicircle, their riders dismounting with the synchronized grace of men who'd shared more than roads. Patches on their vests caught the neon flicker from the motel sign, a serpent uncoiling around a vow etched in iron, symbols of bonds forged in the fires of loss and loyalty. Lena emerged from the lobby, her steps hesitant at first, then purposeful, drawn by the familiar thunder that had once echoed her husband's homecomings. She clutched a worn denim jacket around her shoulders, eyes scanning the faces until they landed on a grizzled veteran with a salt-streaked beard, Marcus, Ethan introduced with a nod, his second in command from the old days. "Brought the core," Marcus said, clasping Ethan's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes, his voice gravel over riverstones. "Heard the call. Vow holds." The group murmured agreements, a low chorus under the patter of lingering rain as they gathered in a loose huddle near the Harleys. Olivia felt the weight of their stares, not hostile but appraising, like wolves sizing up a newcomer to the pack. She straightened, meeting their eyes, her presence beside Ethan, a quiet claim to this unfolding family. Inside the motel's cramped conference room, really just a repurposed storage space with folding chairs and a flickering bulb, plans took shape amid the haze of cigarette smoke and determination. A battered map spread across a rickety table marked with hasty scribbles, suspected safe houses along the border fringes, whispers of a warehouse tucked in the shadow of rusted rail lines where the traffickers hoarded their prizes. Ethan traced a route with a scarred finger, his voice steady as he outlined the approach. "We split into pairs. Scout quiet, no guns unless they force it. Goal's Sarah, clean extraction. Lena's got a photo, we'll know her on sight." Marcus leaned in, his breath fogging the air, adding details from a contact in the network. The ring's leader, a slick operator named Vance, bought off the local sheriff with promises of kickbacks, turning justice into a commodity. "He's got eyes in the department," Marcus warned, "but we've got numbers and the right on our side. Vows about more than rides. It's payback for the forgotten." Olivia sat at the table's edge, her hands clasped to still their tremble, the room's stale warmth pressing close. She'd never been part of something this raw, this charged with moral fire. Her life had been measured in shifts and sympathies, patching wounds without questioning the rot beneath. But here, listening to these men, veterans like Ethan, Their stories laced with echoes of battles lost and oaths unbroken. She felt a shift, like gears engaging in her soul. Attraction to Ethan had ignited in the diner, deepened in the ride, but now it intertwined with purpose, his quiet command drawing her in like the pull of an open road. When Lena squeezed her hand under the table, whispering, "You're a godsend," Olivia nodded. Resolve blooming fierce. "We're getting her back for all of us." As the meeting broke, pairs forming with slaps on backs and murmured strategies, Ethan pulled Olivia aside into the shadowed hallway, the door's creak sealing them in a pocket of intimacy. His eyes, dark pools reflecting the dim light, searched hers. This could turn south fast. Corruption like this, it bites back. "You sure you're in?" The question hung, laced with vulnerability, a crack in the armor of the man who'd changed her world in seconds. She stepped closer, the faint scent of leather and rain on him grounding her. "That joke I made about forgetting attraction, it wasn't just words. You woke something in me, reminded me life's not just enduring. If this is your promise, it's mine too." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb rough against her skin, the touch electric yet tender, sealing an unspoken bond amid the chaos. Outside, the group mounted up, engines coughing to life in a symphony of growls that shook the windows. But as they prepared to roll out, a lone figure approached from the gloom, a disheveled informant, hat pulled low, slipping Marcus a folded note before vanishing into the night. Ethan's face hardened as he read it aloud in a tight circle. Vance's crew had moved Sarah to an old mill on the outskirts, a labyrinth of rusting machinery and hidden rooms guarded by more than just fists. Worse, the sheriff's deputies were en route, tipped off to handle the interference. Tension rippled through the riders, ethical shadows lengthening, confront the law they distrusted or skirt it at the risk of losing the girl. Marcus spat into the dirt. "Badge or no, we don't bend. But we play smart. Flank 'em, get in quiet." Olivia climbed onto the Harley behind Ethan, her arms encircling his waist as the convoy surged forward, taillights winking like fireflies into the enveloping dark. The road twisted through scrubland, moon-silvered and unforgiving, the wind howling secrets past their ears. Her mind raced with dilemmas, the cost of loyalty, the line between justice and vengeance. Ethan's buried scars surfacing in the set of his shoulders. Redemption wasn't a straight path. It wound through moral quagmires, demanding choices that tested the soul. As the mill's silhouette loomed, a hulking beast against the starry sky, faint lights betraying activity within, Olivia whispered against his back, "Whatever comes, we're together." His hand reached back briefly, squeezing her knee, a promise in the gesture. They dismounted in the cover of mesquite thickets, the group fanning out like shadows, boots silent on the crunching earth. Heart pounding, Olivia followed Ethan toward a side entrance, the air thick with the metallic tang of decay and distant voices murmuring inside. A rusted chain-link fence yielded to cutters, the snip echoing like a held breath. But as they slipped through, headlights pierced the night from the opposite road, sheriff's cruisers, sirens silent but lights flashing accusatory blues and reds. The law had arrived, corruption incarnate, forcing a split-second pivot, evade and rescue, or face the storm head-on. Ethan's whisper cut the tension. "Vow first, always." In that moment, loyalty's blade sharpened, carving their path through the gathering tempest, where honor would clash with betrayal and family, chosen in the diner's glow, would stand or shatter. If this tale of quiet courage is stirring something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more hearts in need of hope. The shadows of the old mill loomed like jagged teeth against the moonlit sky, its rusted silos and crumbling walls exhaling the stale breath of forgotten industry. Ethan crouched low behind a cluster of weathered barrels, the metallic tang of rust mingling with the damp earth scent rising from recent rain. Olivia pressed close beside him, her breath shallow and controlled, the warmth of her body a steady anchor in the chill night. The Iron Vow riders had fanned out into the darkness, silent phantoms slipping through the chain-link perimeter, their movements honed by years of navigating worse than this borderland maze. But the sheriff's cruisers, 3 of them now, their blue and red lights pulsing like infected wounds, had pulled up at the main gate, gravel crunching under tires as doors slammed open. Flashlights swept the grounds, beams cutting through the gloom, voices barking orders that carried the hollow ring of authority bought cheap. Ethan's hand rested lightly on Olivia's arm, a silent signal to hold position. His eyes narrowed on the scene unfolding 50 yards away. Marcus and 2 others had peeled off to the east flank, circling toward a side loading dock where faint voices echoed from within the mill, gruff tones laced with urgency, the clink of chains suggesting the horrors they aimed to unravel. "Stay low," Ethan whispered, his voice a rumble against her ear, gravelly from the wind-whipped ride. She nodded, heart thundering like the engines they'd silenced. The attraction that had sparked in the diner's neon now forged into something unbreakable, a tether pulling her through the fear. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was the promise Ethan carried, the one inked in blood and loss, now echoing in her own resolve to stand against the tide of indifference. From their vantage, the cruiser's lights caught glimpses of the lawmen, 4 deputies in starched uniforms, holsters heavy at their hips, moving with the swagger of men who knew the scales tipped their way. The lead one, a stocky figure with a moustache like a broom bristle, shone his beam toward the mill's yawning entrance, shouting, "Vance, we got company sniffing around. Clear out, or we'll handle it official-like." A reply drifted back from the shadows inside, oily and unhurried. "Appreciate the heads up, Sheriff. Girls secured. Send your boys around back if you want a cut." Laughter followed, low and rotten, twisting Olivia's gut. Corruption laid bare, not in whispers but in the open air, a betrayal of the badge that mirrored the small-town rot she'd patched over in her clinic days. Ethan's jaw clenched, the scar on his knuckles whitening as he gripped a pair of bolt cutters, the tool's cold steel a reminder of choices sharper than blades. He signaled to her with a tilt of his head, and they crept forward, skirting the barrels toward a rusted conveyor belt that snaked into the mill's underbelly. The ground was littered with debris, shards of glass crunching softly underfoot, the distant hum of a generator vibrating through the soles of their boots. Olivia's mind flashed to Lena's face back at the motel, etched with the quiet desperation of a mother clinging to hope, and to Ethan's stories of the war, brothers lost to sands that swallowed promises whole. This ride, this stand, it was redemption's edge, where loyalty demanded sacrifice, and justice wore the face of the overlooked. A deputy broke off from the group, flashlights swinging perilously close, his boots thudding in their direction. Ethan pulled her into a recess, the narrow space between corroded panels forcing them chest to chest, his breath warm on her forehead. Time stretched, the beam passing inches away, illuminating motes of dust like fleeting stars. When it moved on, he murmured, "Close, too close, but we're through." They slipped inside via a forgotten service hatch, the door yielding with a muffled squeak that set Olivia's nerves alight. The mill's interior was a labyrinth of shadows, catwalks overhead creaking under invisible weight, the air thick with the musty odor of mold and machine oil. Dim bulbs strung like forgotten Christmas lights cast erratic pools of yellow, revealing stacks of crates stamped with faded warnings, and in the distance the muffled sob of a voice, young, terrified. Sarah. Olivia's pulse surged, her hand finding Ethan's in the dark, fingers intertwining with a grip that spoke of trust earned in miles and moments. They moved in tandem, navigating the maze, Ethan's free hand gesturing silent directions. left around a towering press, duck under a dangling chain that swayed like a noose. Voices grew clearer ahead, bouncing off the iron walls. Vance's crew, 3 men by the sound, their tones laced with crude jests about fresh merchandise. Ethan paused at a corner, peering around, then froze. There, in a cordoned-off alcove lit by a single lantern, sat Sarah, bound to a chair with rough ropes, her face bruised but defiant, eyes wide as she spotted the intruders. One guard loomed nearby, back-turned, fiddling with a radio. "Now!" Ethan breathed, and they surged forward. Olivia's role was clear. Distraction, not force. She stepped into the light first, voice steady despite the quake in her chest. "Hey, you looking for me? The sheriff sent me to negotiate." The guard spun, confusion flickering, giving Ethan the window to close the gap. A swift tackle, muffled grunt, and the man slumped, bound in seconds with his own ropes. Sarah's eyes locked on Olivia, relief flooding her features. "Who?" But Ethan was already at her side, cutters flashing, the snip of ropes echoing like freedom's first breath. "Iron vow," he said simply, helping her stand, her legs wobbling, but spirit unbroken. "Your mum's waiting. Let's get you home." Tears streaked the girl's cheeks, but she nodded, whispering thanks that carried the weight of survival. Olivia wrapped an arm around her, the trio melting back into the shadows, hearts pounding in unison. But alarms blared suddenly, harsh klaxons splitting the night, as Vance's voice boomed over an intercom. "Intruders! Seal the exits!" Chaos erupted. Footsteps thundered from all sides, the sheriff's men converging with shouts, their flashlights turning the mill into a strobe-lit battlefield. Ethan scooped Sarah into a fireman's carry, barking, "This way! Service tunnel!" Olivia followed, adrenaline sharpening her senses, the air alive with the clang of metal and cries of pursuit. They burst into a narrow corridor, damp and echoing, the walls slick with condensation. Behind them, the lawman closed in, one firing a warning shot that ricocheted off pipes, sparks flying like angry fireflies. "Stop! You're under arrest!" But the words rang hollow, tainted by the alliance they'd just witnessed. Outside, through a rear grate they pried open, the night air hit like salvation, cool and vast. Ethan set Sarah down gently, scanning for the others. Marcus's voice cut through the dark from nearby scrub. "Got 3 more out. Rendezvous point now." Engines roared to life in the distance, the Vow's bikes a symphony of escape. But as they sprinted toward the thickets, headlights pinned them, a deputy's cruiser blocking the path, the mustache man stepping out, gun drawn. "End of the line, biker. Drop the girl." Tension coiled, moral lines blurring in the standoff. Ethan's stance shifted, protective shield for Sarah and Olivia, his voice steady as iron. "She's no one's property. Step aside, or the vow shows you what loyalty means." Olivia stepped forward. Sarah clutched close, her voice rising clear. "This ends tonight. No more hiding behind stars." The deputy hesitated, eyes flicking to the gathering rumble of approaching Harleys. Reinforcements, the Brotherhood answering the call. The air crackled with the precipice of choice, corruption's last stand or the dawn of reckoning. Ethan's hand found Olivia's again, a vow renewed in the face of the storm as the first bikes crested the rise, headlights blazing like promises kept. The deputy's flashlight beam pinned them like a spotlight on a stage of reckoning, the harsh white cutting through the night and casting Ethan's shadow long across the scrub-dusted ground. Sarah trembled between Olivia and him, her small frame pressed close, the faint scent of fear sweat mingling with the earthy tang of the desert brush. The man's gun hand steadied, knuckles white on the grip, his moustache twitching under the brim of his hat as he barked again, "Last chance! Hand her over, or we do this the hard way." Behind him, the cruiser's engine idled low, a predatory growl underscoring the threat, its red and blue lights pulsing against the mill's hulking silhouette like a corrupt heartbeat. Ethan didn't budge, his boots rooted in the dirt, body a barrier of leather and resolve. The weight of the Iron Vow's serpent patch on his vest felt heavier now, a reminder of oaths sworn under distant suns, promises that had pulled him from solitary miles into this fray. Olivia's hand gripped Sarah's shoulder, her other brushing Ethan's arm, a silent circuit of strength, the attraction that began with a diner's jest, now the steel in her spine. She'd crossed lines tonight she never imagined, from pouring coffee to prying open the jaws of injustice, all for the quiet honor in his eyes. "She's not going anywhere," Ethan said, voice even as canyon wind, carrying no rage, only the unyielding truth of a man who'd buried brothers and kept their words alive. "Your boss, Vance? His game's over. The Vow sees everything." The deputy sneered, shifting his weight. But doubt flickered in his eyes like a dying bulb, fed by the swelling roar, cresting the ridge behind them. Headlights multiplied, a convoy of Harleys thundering into view, engines harmonizing in a defiant chorus that shook the ground. Marcus led the pack, his bike slewing to a halt at the thicket's edge, followed by the others, 15 riders strong, their forms silhouetted against the moon. Vests gleaming with the Vow's emblem. They dismounted in a fluid wave, not charging but encircling, a wall of quiet menace that spoke of loyalty deeper than blood. "Easy now," Marcus called, hands visible but posture coiled, his voice cutting the tension like a knife through fog. "We ain't here for badges, just the girl, and whatever rot you're protecting." The air thickened, charged with the standoff's electric hush, rain-scented wind whispering through the mesquite. Olivia's pulse thrummed in her ears, visions flashing, her mother's frail hand in hers during endless nights, the clinic's cold fluorescence hiding small-town secrets, and now this, standing firm in the face of bought justice. Sarah lifted her chin, voice a whisper but fierce. "I want my mom, please." The words pierced the deputy, a crack in his armor, his gaze dropping to the girl's face, shadowed with signs of ordeal but unbroken spirit. He hesitated, gun wavering, the moral weight pressing as the riders closed ranks, their presence a tide eroding his resolve. From the mill's rear, shouts erupted, Vance's crew spilling out, scrambling toward trucks in the chaos. But the Vow's flanks had already cut them off, shadows converging without a shot fired. No violence, just the inexorable press of truth. Marcus's pair emerging with 2 more runaways in tow, wide-eyed and grateful, proof of the ring's wider web. The deputy glanced back, seeing his allies falter, Vance himself caught in the headlights, hands raised in futile bluster. "This is interference. You'll all rot for—" But his words choked as Ethan stepped forward, not aggressive, just present, eyes locking with the lawman's. "Rot's what you've built here, turning blind for coin, letting kids vanish into shadows. My brother died keeping promises like this one. What's yours worth?" The question hung, poetic in its simplicity, forcing the man to confront the mirror of his choices. Sweat beaded on his brow, the gun lowering inch by inch, the cruiser's lights reflecting his internal storm. Olivia watched, breath held, the bond with Ethan a steady flame amid the tempest, his redemption unfolding not in fury, but in this quiet stand, pulling her into a family forged from chance and courage. Sarah squeezed her hand, a small anchor, as the first siren wailed. Not from the cruisers, but distant, real law rolling in from a tip Marcus had slipped earlier. Clean badges from the state line, drawn by whispers of the Vow's network. The deputy holstered his weapon, defeated slump in his shoulders, stepping aside with a mutter that dissolved into the night. "Get her out of here." No arrest, no clash, just the unraveling of corruption under loyalty's gaze. The convoy reformed, engines purring to life as Sarah was bundled onto a bike with Lena's old friend from the group, her sobs turning to relieved gasps. Ethan turned to Olivia, the moonlight etching his features, a rare smile cracking the weariness. "You held the line. Didn't know you'd ride like that." She leaned into him, the leather of his jacket warm now, attraction blooming into something eternal, a shared vow, unspoken but binding. You changed everything. That joke, it's ancient history. They mounted up, the Harley vibrating beneath them as the group surged onto the road, taillights stretching into a river of light against the fading storm clouds. Miles blurred, the desert yielding to open plains, Sarah safe in the fold, Vance's ring crumbling under incoming investigations, the vow's quiet actions rippling into justice's dawn. Back at the motel by first light, Lena enveloped her daughter in tears and embraces, the air alive with gratitude's hush. Olivia stood with Ethan on the porch, coffee steaming in mugs, the sun gilding the horizon in gold. "Promised him we'd watch out," he said softly, arm around her waist. "Didn't figure it'd lead here to you." She smiled, the weight of her own losses lighter now, redeemed in this chosen kin. "Family's what we make, and this one's just starting." As the riders dispersed, bonds renewed, Olivia felt the road's call not as escape, but home, honor as legacy, promises enduring like the engine's faithful hum. In the quiet aftermath, two souls, once adrift, rode forward together, the biker who'd changed everything proving that attraction at its core was the spark of unbreakable light. If this journey of redemption and loyalty has touched your heart, thank you for riding along. Please subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of promises kept. We'd love to have you in the family.